In order to get started with React more easily, we are going to use Code Sandbox. So let's get in there, create a sandbox, and use the React template. And immediately you will see a bunch of really non-standard JavaScript in here. So we are going to get rid of these non-standard bits so we can start from a place more familiar. This app function will just return null. And this part right here, we will replace it with its equivalent in vanilla JavaScript, which is simply React create element passing in app. This guy. So let's break everything down. First, we have a bunch of imports. And we can see we are consuming two different libraries that have to do with React. React on the one hand, and React DOM. Next is the app component. This is a React component, a custom React component, which we build ourselves. React components usually return React elements, although in this instance, we're simply returning null. However, components must be capitalized. And components must return something, even if that something is a humble null. Next comes the root element. And we have mentioned that React components usually return React elements. However, this root element is not a React element. It's an actual element from the page, from the DOM. And we are getting it by ID, expecting an ID of root in there somewhere on the page. So let's take a look. Expand. And there it is. Or elements produced using React will be injected into this div. So we will call this element the anchor element. Next comes the most complicated line, so we better make sure we break it down thoroughly. First, we can see that two different libraries are coming into play. We are invoking React DOM.render, and then inside we are passing in two arguments. The first one being a React element produced off of a component, and the second argument is the anchor point where we intend to inject this markup. So React DOM.render could be thought of as the act of appending this element here. Now all of this will usually be done only once per application, and most of your work will be creating lots and lots of components. Let's have the app component do something a little bit more interesting, like return a React element. And with vanilla JavaScript, we would go about it like this. React create element, similar to this, but a little bit more complicated. We just want to create a humble div. So the first argument is a string that says div. The second argument is an object containing any attributes I wish to inject, like an ID of greet, perhaps. And the third argument is the inner content we wish to inject into this div, perhaps the text hello. Once that's done, we can see our hello right here. And on inspection, we can see that effectively this particular div got created by the framework and injected into the anchor point. Now, it's a little bit annoying to have to do things like this, and this even, whenever we need to create React elements. And the way we get around it is with JSX. And JSX is the part which is not standard JavaScript and forces us to use Code Sandbox to be able to work easily. Let's see what that looks like. We will comment out this line. We can immediately see an error because, as we said, components need to return something. So let's return a div with JSX with a text content of hello and perhaps an ID of greet. And here we are, and of course the result is the same. But this is way easier, and this React element maps really closely to the way HTML elements look like on the page. So it's a very clever and convenient way of writing React elements. Div is a built-in component, comes with React, and the way we obtain an element out of it is with the JSX, with this syntax that kind of looks like HTML. So if we need to obtain an element off of the app component, instead of going through all this, we could do something really similar, which is just to use JSX. And there it works. So we create React components to be able to make elements. And our custom components return React elements, and these are the guys that will end up on the page. But again, this part down here will usually only have to be done once. Now, how closely does JSX map to actual HTML? Well, there are a few differences. For example, if we needed this div to have a class name of myGreet, say, we wouldn't be able to just use the regular class myGreet. We would actually have to use the word class name. If we inspect element, now we can see how that React element ended up becoming a real div element on the page with a real class name there. Now, another cool feature of JSX is how we can interpolate values inside of it, right? So the way this React element is written as the return value of this component, we always get the same thing. What if we could interpolate variables inside of here, right? Instead of this hard-coded hello, this could come from a JavaScript variable, or perhaps one of these attributes could come from a JavaScript variable, right? So suppose we have a const here of ID with a value of greet. The way we interpolate variables inside of attributes is by using curly braces. Here we could use ID, and there it is, back to working. How about the text content? Let's create a variable called text, and it says hello, if I can type. Now, same story. We can interpolate variables using curly braces, text in there, and there it is, back to working. And these variables, of course, can come from anywhere. The usual rules of lexical scope and closures still apply. So these variables, perhaps they're declared out here. Still working. It doesn't matter. This is just JavaScript, except for the JSX little bits, right? So don't forget, classes are class names, and we can interpolate expressions. These in here are expressions using the curly braces, right? So to prove the point, let's interpolate in there the concatenation of hello and the world and the word world. See how it works? Or perhaps we can put a math operation in there, like 2 + 1. And there's our 3, and so on and so forth. So I hope you like this very gentle introduction to React and JSX. Stay tuned for more.